Real JP Multimedia, proud sponsor of the Nerdball Podcast. Here to help you with all things audio, video, graphics, photo, web design. From weddings to real estate, commercial business to private use, we offer a big variety of services for almost any budget. And if we can't do it, we will find someone who can. Find us at realjp.com. That's REELJP.com. Real JP Multimedia.
Hi, this is Bill Hilt, and this is the Nerdball Podcast.
This is the Nerdball Podcast with Lorenzo Melcher.
Awesome, Bill. Thanks for coming on my podcast. Your podcast number 2 in my new studio space. So I want to say thank you to Fort Meigs CrossFit for helping me be in this great office. If you want to contact them, their website is fortmeigscrossfit.com. Got a bunch of different classes, all any skill level, and there's kids classes, adult classes, anything you need, they got it here. So check them out at fortmeigscrossfit.com. Bill, thanks for coming on. I don't know you personally. I know you through a lot of my friends. And the one thing that always comes up, and you can tell me if this is accurate or not, I moved to Perrysburg when I was a freshman. So I did not play football in junior high. But you used to be a junior high football coach, correct?
True. Yes.
And my friends, the memory they have is you guys, my friend said that you guys were good, but you ran a lot. Is that accurate?
We had excellent conditioning.
Yeah. And that's what they said.
And then, you know what? There was a couple of games where that made the difference.
Sure. Yeah. I've been, I was a head football coach, freshman football coach for about 4 years. And that was the one thing that I wanted to do. Like, we're going to be conditioned. So if something happens, we're going to be ready for this, for whatever comes our way. So.
Plus, there was nothing easier on the coaches than, just making the kids run.
100%.
We could sit around and BS around on the sidelines and watch them run.
That's when you talk about the kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Bill, tell me, like, my first questions are always like where you're from, where you grew up at. But before I have a tendency to forget, my main question all the time is, what is something you've been nerding out about lately? Something you're really into, if it's books, movies, TV show, something that you just gets you out of work, because it just can't be about work, something that you're just really into.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me on here today. I've recently found podcasts, and I really find that I enjoy them. At the beginning of COVID, when everybody else was kind of locking down and getting fat and lazy, I actually did the opposite, and I lost over the course of like a year and a half about 80 pounds, and I was walking. I went from being able to walk for about maybe 12 to 15 minutes to, now I walk usually around an hour and a half a day.
Wow.
And so I discovered podcasts because I wanted something to do while I was walking. And I find them really fascinating. So I think this is the first time I've ever been on a podcast. So I think it's pretty cool.
Where do you normally walk? Just around your neighborhood, or do you go different places?
When the weather's nice around my neighborhood, I walk at school at Hall Prairie Intermediate School where I teach.
Okay.
We have some stairs, and I've gotten to where now I do like 50 or 60 flights of stairs a day.
Yeah.
So I just kind of walk up and down and around the stairs after school, sometimes during my lunch.
All right. Yeah, that's but you're right. There was a lot of people who just hunkered down and watched TV, but that's good to for you just to get out and do something. Is that one of the main reasons? Is like, I don't want to be sitting around.
I would have to say that it was just a matter of I hit a point in my life and I wasn't all that happy with myself physically. Mm-hmm. I always said, I'm never going to be a diet guy. I'm a fat guy. I'm okay with it. I love to cook. I love to eat.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be a fat guy.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, something just went, you really should try. And so I just started slow, and I feel great. I feel 10 or 15 years younger. I got a lot more energy. It's been a wonderful thing. I did the intermittent fasting, 5-2. So basically I kind of eat what I want 5 days a week, and 2 days a week, 600 calories or less.
Oh, wow.
And so, but I've been doing it for close to 2 years now.
Okay.
And, I think it's just become my lifestyle. That's how I do things.
Did you start like when you did intermittent fasting? Was it like it's going to be 600 calories, or was that like stepping stones like we're dropping down?
It was going to be 600 calories.
Yeah.
And what I found was when I started, I would try to break those calories up throughout the day. But I found that for me, the best thing to do was not to eat at all. Because once I start eating, I'm all in. I like to eat.
I get it, man.
So, I discovered things like I make a heck of a cabbage soup. I mean, I call it cabbage soup, but it's cabbage and it's got a lot of other vegetables, but it's all vegetables.
Yeah.
And I can eat a lot of it
Yeah.
for 600 calories. So, at 9, 10 o'clock at night, I'll make this soup up and then I can go to bed with a full belly.
Sure, yeah.
So that's what I like.
What is because like I said, my brother-in-law knows you and follows you on your social medias and stuff. I said before the podcast, and you put a lot of food on there. Is there something that you really like to cook? Besides that cabbage soup, is something that just like I'm gonna cook this and because it's my favorite thing.
I love to cook new and different things. So I try not to. It's hard to say there's a specialty, but I do love when people ask me that question. I say, probably my favorite thing to cook from start to finish to, the end product is ramen and pho.
Okay.
And in fact, I made a batch of pho this past week and served it up last night, and it was just unreal good. Oh, it was so good. I was like breaking my arm, patting myself on the back for that one.
Do you ever, being a teacher, like I would imagine you always have to like pack a lunch or cook or something because you can't really leave during the school day. Did that kind of play into like you wanting to cook more just so you can get variety as opposed to packing a bologna sandwich every day?
For the longest time in my teaching career, I ate the school lunch.
Okay.
And I was kind of a school lunch nerd. I love, pizza day was like, pizza day. I love those
Square
little square
pizza.
school pizzas and the little fiestada things, but then the cafeteria quality food changed with whoever was, in charge.
Yeah.
And then I got to the point where I was always taking in like leftovers and stuff. And now I don't eat I don't eat lunch very often at school because a lot of times I'll skip the lunch. I've been doing so. I plateaued with my diet.
Okay.
And so just to kind of change things up a little bit, I've been doing more where I won't eat until I get home at night. Kind of there's something called an 8-16 where you do all your eating within 8 hours, and I kind of been throwing that in. And the bonus side of that was that I'm more productive because during my lunch, instead of sitting around and talking to the other teachers, I'm either walking and getting some of my exercise steps in or, doing some planning or grading or reaching out.
Yeah.
It's, but I do totally nerd out on food.
Yeah.
I nerd out on, this is the perfect podcast for me because I have all these things that I have nerded. I'm a go big or go home kind of guy.
Okay.
It's like, I remember back in 2000, I was nerding out on making wine.
Yeah.
Okay. So it started out, I made a few batches of wine. And then a couple years later, I have like 17 batches of wine going at various forms of fermentation and bottling and aging. And, in 2005, I had to stop because I had a panic attack. Oh, no. And I never knew what that was.
Yeah.
And then, but I thought I was dying. It's like I'm having a heart attack or a stroke or something. I went to the hospital and they said, "Oh, it's a panic attack." And so then I was like, "All right, I got to see what I can kind of take off my plate.
Sure.
What's working in the background causing me this anxiety?" And so in 2005, I stopped making wine. I haven't made wine since then.
I've been that way too. And my wife.
Well, if you have a podcast about nerding out, you got to have some of those skeletons in your closet.
Yeah. So and that happens, and like I said, God bless my wife because she'll just hang on to whatever ride we're taking that time. And this podcast actually has a longer shelf life than any of the other things. There was a point where we were raising ducks in our backyard and for eggs, and I've been working on the patio for.
See, I'd turn those eggs into noodles. Duck egg noodles are pretty good.
Oh yeah. So I had to do a lot of research. So when I would go to my wife to say, "This is my plan," I had all these questions answered already. But I never saw that anywhere. I saw people really liked them for baking. But I never knew that for the duck egg noodles. Yeah.
I got a friend that's doing, maybe it's just the fact that even it's a fresher egg or something, but I had a friend that gave me a couple dozen duck eggs and I made some noodles with them, and they were really good.
Yeah, so I am with you as far as like, hey, I'm gonna do this for 6 months to 2 years, and then I'm just gonna do something else, you know.
Back in 2000, well, even before that, I've always been into international things. I really have a passion for international education and global connections and things like that. And back in 2011, I started an organization called the World Affairs Council of Northwest Ohio, and it was one of those things when I started it, even I was like, well, we'll see where this is in 5 years because, the fire might die out or whatever. But, here we are. It's been 11 plus years and our organization is still going fairly strong. I think we have a lot to offer the community. So I do nerd out about global international stuff a lot too.
Well, let's back up here. Where did you grow up around here?
Yeah, I grew up in Perrysburg.
Oh, okay.
My parents both graduated from Perrysburg High School. I graduated from Perrysburg High School. My grandfather graduated from Perrysburg High School. So if you know Kazmeyer's grocery store, so my grandfather was Al Kazmeyer.
Oh.
He's since passed, but my Uncle Alan runs the store, and my cousin Michael now they run the store.
Yeah.
And so we have that family connection, and so there's a lot of history here in Perrysburg.
So you went to Perrysburg, and I'm assuming it changed, and I don't want to date you here, but I know when I was in high school, I graduated in 2003. It was most of the kids were like, I want to leave Perrysburg. I want to get out of Perrysburg. Was that always a thing, or even when you were in high school, you're just like, well, this is the town I love, and I'm going to stay here?
I would say that in general, there was like some kids kind of were ready to move on to something different and more exciting, and others were happy to move back if they could.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I was kind of a homebody, and I really, really liked it. I went to college at Bluffton College,
Okay.
and it's like 1 hour from doorstep to doorstep. And so I came home about every weekend when I was in school and just, hung out with my friends here and stuff. So I did have a summer. In the summer when I was 19 years old, I went out to New Mexico, and I worked for a summer as a cowboy. At the Boy Scout ranch out there. There's a Boy Scout ranch called Philmont. And I had always been, I was like, cowboys was something. I read all these Western novels as a kid. And I always wanted to be a cowboy. And then, I got this opportunity, and I was basically playing a cowboy. It was an interpretive camp, and I got to pretend like I was a cowboy. But I did get to do some, I went on a little cattle drive for a little bit, realized that it's actually the dogs that do most of the work on a cattle drive. But that was just a great experience. And I think, my parents were always really good about just kind of letting me kind of do what I was doing, and they really encouraged me and supported me. So, I got into this habit young of doing like cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I've just kind of continued throughout my life to just always look for the cool things to do.
Did you participate in sports and stuff in high school?
I was a football player.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Did you play when you were real little, or was it just something you did when you were in high school?
Yeah, I played. It was always there was 4 of us in the neighborhood growing up. My brother and I, and Drew Crane and Jeff Crane. And Drew Crane and Jeff were both really good football players for Perrysburg. I was just kind of more or less your average. I wasn't great. And I did go and I played at Bluffton for a year too, and that was a great experience.
Yeah.
Ray Pullman was a real big influence on me back then, and he was like, you could look at Bluffton College, and I was like, really? He kind of pointed me in that direction, encouraged me, called the coach, and the coach said, oh yeah, you can come down and play. And when I got there, I realized I was never going to be an NFL player. So after the first year of playing, I was like, I think I'll just concentrate on other things here in school. Some of these fun school things.
Sure, yeah. What position did you play?
I was a center.
Okay.
When I went to Bluffton, I was a guard.
All right. Well, that's good that you figured out like, hey, this isn't my thing. But you also, like you said, I'm going to concentrate on school because this is why I'm here to begin with.
Right. And it was a great way to enter that new phase of my life because you went like 10 days early for 3-a-day practices or whatever, but you got to know a bunch of people before everybody else came in. So by the time all the other new freshmen were coming in, you already had kind of a group of people, and it was a really nice way to transition.
That's how I played football at Perrysburg because I wasn't going to. I moved here when I was a freshman, and my dad said, play football your freshman year, so you meet people before school. You're a new kid in a new city, and I did. I think there was only one kid in one of my 7 classes that was on the football team, but I felt good. You know, it was the last period. It was science class, and I had some friends there from the football team. But it was the same way, like meet people, and Mr. Pullman did the same thing for me in high school. Like, I wasn't going to play after my freshman year, and he talked to me and said, I think you're going to be a good football player. You should reconsider this and that. And because of him, I continued, and I ended up playing all 4 years. So.
I was ready to leave Bluffton after the first year, like after the first quarter. I told my parents, I said, I think I want to go to a bigger school, maybe get into BG or something like that. And my dad was like, why don't you just finish what you started here? Finish the year, and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had that in mind, but then had such a good time spring quarter. I met the girl who would become my wife, and so I stayed at Bluffton for the 4 years. And I tell people now that besides being born to the parents I was born to, going to Bluffton College was the next biggest factor in who I became in my life. Because it's a really small liberal arts college, and coming from Perrysburg, I was coming from a place with almost no diversity. Mm-hmm. And at Bluffton also didn't have a lot of diversity because, it was a lot of, Midwest white kids like me.
Yeah.
But there was more diversity there. And even back in 1990, Bluffton was trying to concentrate on the importance of diversity and different opinions and perspectives. And it just kind of sunk into me, and that was really kind of who I became throughout life. That's always been a real guiding principle for me, is just, when I came back to Perrysburg, I really always wanted to come back and teach in Perrysburg for some reason. I think it was just more or less the safety of it. It was what I knew. And when I came back to Perrysburg, one of my big goals was, like, I'm going to introduce this town to what it means to look at people that are different from you. And, I was trying to kind of help them understand the experiences that I had. And, it's really been a blessing. And now when I look around my classroom, I mean, Perrysburg, you couldn't really say it's like a top diverse school, but it's gotten so much more diverse. Mm-hmm. And, I'm kind of happy. I'm living in my my new comfort zone. I'm like, this is great. At school, I have an international club, and we do some cool activities with the kids to kind of introduce them to other places in the world. Just the other day, we went to an Uzbek restaurant that's kind of out by the turnpike, and that was, it was really nice. And we had the kids and their families there and stuff, and it was just kind of a cool thing. And that's what you get when you hang out with Mr. Hill.
That's. I'm glad you said that about diversity, because that's something that I always try to do with the football team. I've been coaching football here for 10 years. The varsity, I just finished up my 4th year in the varsity. But I want kids that are going to, you don't have to play a sport or not, but I especially focus on the football team just because I'm out there with them all the time. I want you to realize, like, the world you're going to, because here in Perrysburg, like you said, it's getting more diverse, but you're still in a bubble and you're still with your friends. And, a lot of them are white friends. I want you to realize, like, there's other things out there, and I want you to at least be aware and at least know how to react to different situations that aren't here.
Right. I was fortunate when I was at Bluffton, my sophomore year, about the middle of the year, I had kind of, I guess you would say, manipulated the system, but I managed to land myself a corner room, which were bigger rooms, mm-hmm. and I managed to land it on my own because I knew the guy that was in the room draw with me, that he wasn't coming back, and he was a senior, so he got an early draw. So I had a corner room to myself. I was living large. And then one night I got a call from the lady who was in charge of housing, and I was on student senate at Bluffton too, and she was our student senate advisor, and she says, "Hey Bill, I got some great news for you. I've got a roommate for you." And I was like,
"Great news for who?"
Great, awesome, whoa, yeah. And then she said, "Yeah, he's from Kenya." And I was like, "Ah." And so my wife remembers this best, but apparently I called her up and I just started ranting and raving about how I was going to have some bushman living with me and blah, 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 blah. And, he moved in. That night I went out to the bar, and he moved in, and I came home, and it was like, midnight, 1:00.
Yeah.
I had these lofts in my room. Lincoln Hall, where we lived, was built in like 1880 something, and the walls were like 12 foot high. And my dad and I built these lofts that were like 10 foot high, and so we only had like a foot between the ceiling and your face if you were up there laying in bed. And the ladder to get up there was just an old rickety ladder that I think he pulled out of a dumpster at a construction site. But my roommate Jack had managed to get up into there and was kind of sleeping up there. And I saw him, and like he didn't have a pillow or anything. And I was like, oh man. So like I had 2 pillows. Mm-hmm. I threw him a pillow, and that was kind of the beginning. And he ended up being in my wedding.
Oh, really? I was just going to ask
later.
you, like, if you still talk to him.
Yeah, and in fact, I visited him this summer. He lives in Minneapolis now.
Okay.
And I visited him this summer, and then he came. My parents now live out at Put-in Bay, and he and his wife came and visited with my parents, and we went out to the island for a couple of days. And so there were long periods of time where I didn't like really talk to him very much. We had a business investment together when I had just graduated. He was still in school. We were growing sugar cane in Kenya. It didn't work out, but
Yeah.
it was a dream, and it was supposed to be big money.
Sure.
But that I also I see that as one of the stepping stones along my path of enlightenment, if you could call it that.
Sure,
But
yeah.
it was just one of those things where I went from kind of being like, well, people that are different are okay, to and in fact people that are different can go on to be one of your best friends. So I learned so much from him, though, just about, I guess you'd call it the privilege of being an American and having the things, because like we'd go up to my house the first time, and we're going down I-75, and he just keeps looking and looking, and I'm like, what are you looking at? He says, the bridges. He said, in my country we have like a bridge.
Oh, wow.
And here you have like a bridge every couple miles just to make it so traffic can go easier. And he had a hard time understanding that. And then, we get to the house, and you put up the garage door with the garage door opener, and he's like, whoa.
Wow.
I remember the first time he ever came to my house, he had disappeared for like a half hour, and then he comes out and he says, I can't figure out how to get the shower to work, because you had to like pull up on something, and just funny stories like that. We have a lot of those. But I had decided, if I was going to have an international roommate, I was going to make him the coolest international guy on the campus. So that was kind of my mission.
Did you succeed?
I did pretty well,
Yeah.
I think. I mean, he succeeded. I just kind of, but I gave him a few tricks, like some of the international people, you'd walk by, hey, what's up? And they'd go, oh, very good, thank you, and I was like, dude, no, you can't do that. If someone says, what's up? You go, not a lot, not much. So it's just some of those little things.
Yeah. Man, that's cool. And you always, when somebody, even they don't have to be from a different country, just a different place in America, and they come to somewhere and they're like, oh, look at this thing. You take for granted these things sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
And you're like, we do have bridges everywhere, and they are very helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
And I mean, just that mindset has made such a difference in my life, because, even perceiving how something might appear to a woman as opposed to a man, it's allowed me this ability to kind of meet people where they are. And I think that has helped people. People are very comfortable with me, and people really, I found, especially here later in life, that people are really like comfortable talking to me and see me as someone that they can reach out to and kind of get advice from. And I've leaned into that role a little bit. And, I think especially now, we're really facing a mental health crisis in this country and in this world. And so, I think we need to have some close relationships, some people that we can talk to.
Yeah.
That, we can run some things by.
That's people, businesses are always concerned with, why do we got to have a diverse board or a diverse workplace, or being diverse just makes the chance for different ideas from different people. That if you have 10 of the same people, no one's going to ever have any ideas or expand, or no one's going to know like how to react to something when it's always the same. If you have all these diverse people, or surround yourself with diverse friends, and it just makes everything better to help, like you said, just to give another perspective on something you might be going through.
A fresh perspective just really, it makes just an absolute big difference. I know when I was at Bluffton, and it was my junior year, and I was on student senate, as I had said, and we had an issue that came to us where the board of trustees of the university, they wanted to start a diversity scholarship, and most of my, what you would call, I guess, constituents, the guys that I knew, were really against it. Why would we, why should somebody get an extra scholarship, extra help, extra money just because they're different? And so, I was kind of going into it where I have to kind of represent the viewpoint of my constituents. These guys, they're counting on me to represent them.
Yeah.
But as it went on, and I realized that this was such a great thing, and that I had my experience as having been influenced by having a diverse roommate.
Yeah.
I really had to kind of vote the way that I knew, because I was like, I have more information than they do, and they don't know how important this is, but I do. And
Was that hard for you to do that?
It was real hard. And I was like, a 20-year-old kid or something like that, and it really also gave me a little bit of a good perspective of what it's like for, our lawmakers, and, they have to represent their constituencies, but, sometimes they have to vote their conscience or their knowledge too. So, I felt like that was a really good foundational building block to who I became.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's obviously something I can carry you forward, not just, hey, I'm going to run for office as I get older, but just like you said, just in life. Like, sometimes I have to make decisions that other people seem they will see that it might not be the correct thing. Like now I'm a supervisor at my job, work for the Metro Parks. Sometimes I'm going to make a decision where my guys aren't going to be happy with it, but overall it's best for everyone because like you said, I have more information.
It serves the greater good.
Yeah.
And, sometimes especially, I think especially young people haven't quite figured that out yet. Yeah. So,
well, even me, right? So I was at, an email got sent out saying, hey, this is how we run our meetings. Do you guys think we should change it up? We could do this, we could do that. This is our chief of operations telling us. And as singular supervisors, we're emailing back saying, no, it's good. I think everything works this. And then we created a group together of a meeting of supervisors, and we all said the opposite in this meeting. And I learned like, okay, well, we all voted or gave our input based on what we thought our chief of operations wanted. But when we all were together, then we also decided like, oh, wait, no, we just said that to say it, but we actually feel this way.
Right. Groupthink.
Yeah.
Groupthink is speaking of nerding out, like for the last at least decade, my nerd out has been like, I'm really curious about how the brain works, how we have our biases. There's a book that I read it kind of on a continuous rolling basis. When I finish it, I just start over because it's got little snippets. It's called You're Not So Smart. And it talks about all the heuristics and brain biases that you have. And, groupthink was one that got to me. And it was like the first rule of groupthink is every group needs an a-hole. It's like there has to be somebody there to challenge. Yeah. And, now I'm the president of the World Affairs Council of Northwest Ohio, and I have a board. In January, I become the president of the Ohio Council for the Social Studies. Mm-hmm. And that's like it's a 2-year term, but it's like a 6-year commitment. I've been the vice president for 2 years, and I'll be the immediate past president for 2 years after I serve. And, and that's been one of the things that I'm like, the cornerstone of my administration is going to be, that I want to not have groupthink. I want you to tell me what you think. I want you to challenge everything I say. Look for ways to find weakness in it, because, I've noticed that so many times we go through these group things, especially if there's a power differential. And I don't think it's good for anybody. So
No, I tell my crew that all the time. Like, guys, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to mess up. And when you guys come to me because I have this idea, or we should do it this way or that way, there's going to be times where I tell you no, but that doesn't mean I don't want you to keep doing that, because I think it's important that you guys play a role in how we this is your park too. Like, how we manage this park isn't just me. I'm the end all. I'm the final say, but I also want you guys a part of this, because again, this is your park. So if you feel like I'm just telling you things all the time, you're not going to be invested in it as much. So I want you to, like you said, challenge me. Again, I may say no, but don't stop doing that.
Right. And I think that's important that you do that, because then, you're forced to sort of put your ego aside a little bit, and you're forced to consider other perspectives. And I mean, in the end, it's just going to make you stronger and better in the end when you're able to do that. I mean, I think humility is one of the things that I've probably learned more about in the last few years than I had my whole life. And if I could instill anything, I mean, like, my overall message to my students and people that I know is that number one, you have to be a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
If you have that mentality, it will serve you well. But the other thing is humility. You have to, part of being a lifelong learner is you're not learning all this so that you can tell other people what should be done. You're doing this so that, as a whole, you can kind of figure out the best ways to do things. And if you have that attitude of humility, it's just going to it's going to happen so much faster and better.
One of my favorite things to say, believe it or not, is when someone asks me a question, be it a football player or someone at work is ask me a question, I say, I don't know. Because I tell them, it's like, I don't know, but I'll find the answer for you.
Exactly.
And like you said, it's me learning, and then I'm teaching somebody else. But they also see, like, oh, he doesn't know everything all the time, which, that's to me, it should be obvious. But sometimes people in different levels of power or whatever, they just think like, oh, he knows everything, he's just going to tell me how it is, So I like being able to say that to people, because it just gives them, I think it gives them more comfort with me.
Yeah, and if you have this attitude like there's an answer, I think you're already you're already facing a setback, because a lot of times there's not really an answer. It's this is so and so's answer, this is so and so's answer. So it's a lot. It's a heavy lift. It takes a little work, and a lot of people aren't interested in that.
No. So you were at Bluffton, and did you always know, like, hey, I'm going to do social studies or history, or was that something you always knew that you wanted to teach, or was there different?
No, I never knew what I was really going to do. One of my best friends growing up, his mom was a teacher at the high school. She was an English teacher, and when I was in high school, my sophomore year, my brother was killed in a car accident. He was 18 and I was 15. And of course, those are going to be very formative events in your life. And, I relied on a lot of people helping me get through that. And my buddy's mom was one of those people, and I had her in class. She was my teacher. And then she was my teacher a couple other times. And, I was also a Boy Scout. And in Boy Scouts, as I got older, I started working with the younger kids, teaching them skills and things like that. And I never even really thought about it, but as I approached high school graduation, trying to figure out what to do, it kind of occurred to me. I did want to be a forest ranger. That was my like the first thing, Ranger Bill.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a construction worker.
Yeah.
And my mom said, you're going to be like your dad. You have to go out on days like this and be outside working. And, it was like 10 below zero. And I was like, yeah, maybe you're right. You might be onto something, Mom. But when I went to Bluffton, the idea was I was going to be a science teacher. I always loved history. I was a big history buff. But, at that time, and probably still now, history, social studies jobs were harder to get because there were a lot of people that wanted them, and there just weren't all that many jobs. So in order to be more marketable as a teacher, I decided science. Yeah. And then I remember I took this anatomy class, and it was like in high school anatomy, I did fine. 'Cause, first of all, understand, I was not a stellar student throughout my career until after my brother's death. I kind of got it in my head that now I have to be successful because I'm a parent's last chance, you know? So, like, I went at the end of my sophomore year, I had like a 1.97 GPA.
Wow.
And then when I started driving, my dad was like, if you get straight A's, I'll pay for your car insurance. So every time the car insurance was due that quarter, I had straight A's.
Yeah.
But then once you see I am capable of that, then it's easier. So I might drift back and have a couple B's on the off quarter. Then the next quarter, it was all A's again.
I never got that part. Like my dad, I was grounded so many times from my grades. I think I ended up graduating with a 2.3. And
that's what I ended up with.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, something.
Yeah,
like
I just
that.
never I didn't apply myself because I could have got all A's and B's, but it took work, and I didn't want to work. I didn't want to do it, And so I never got, even because my dad even said well, if you get bad grades, I'm going to take your car away because okay, well, I guess it got taken away then, because I just couldn't do it.
It's interesting because I sometimes counsel parents that are trying to get their kids to get their grades up, and they always say, I ground them, I take everything away. And, I kind of give them the old Dr. Phil, like, how's that working for you? And so I usually try and tell them, it's not the severity of the punishment, it's the certainty of it. And if something's not working pretty much right away, it's probably not going to work, So,
do you find in your being a teacher talking to parents, do you find anything that works better than others, or is it all just depend on the family?
Probably if I had that information, I wouldn't be sitting here with you doing this. I would be on some Harvard podcast.
Sure.
And, I think a lot of times it's just you got to meet them where they're at. A lot of times there's probably a reason for it. And it might be a learning disability, or it might be attention disorder kind of thing, or it could be motivation. I mean, I find that most kids, at least the kids that I teach, are capable of at least doing passing work if the motivation is right.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a basic tenet of psychology. It's like the positive has a tendency to work better than punishment.
Yeah.
Punishment just isn't something that really works long term, and it's just, I think you need to find their passion and kind of light a fire in them. But it's always going to be a struggle. We're never going to find the answers. But, I think as educators, we're getting a lot better. And I think a big part of that is we've recently, within the last 5 or 10 years, social emotional learning has become a big thing in education. And I'm really in favor of it because I think that, especially these days, kids can find all the information that they need on their phone or their computer. So do we really need to spend a bunch of time trying to teach them things so that they remember it? First of all, we got to make them feel like school's a good place to be, that, you're comfortable there. And then we can work with them on finding what they want to learn and how they can learn it. But, they need that social and emotional support, because anybody that's been through school knows most of your mental state is wrapped into what are other people going to think on one level. What's this girl going to think of me? What's my teacher? Why does my teacher hate me? And it's easy to say things like, oh, my teacher hates me and stuff like that. But if you kind of teach them to understand that they can kind of understand where others are coming from and how they fit in, and, it just makes them feel more comfortable. Yeah. And then you can do a better job of teaching when they feel comfortable.
I'm waiting for my children one's in 5th grade and one's in 2nd grade, and I'm waiting for the day where they're like, I don't like school. Because right now, it's all good. But maybe that it is. They just continue to enjoy school, or at least enjoy enough of school to get them to do well in it.
And I'll tell you, Perrysburg I see a lot of education around the state and around the country and the way they do things. And Perrysburg, deserves the status that we hold, because we do a fantastic job. And that comes all the way from the top to the bottom, I mean, things are really pretty good in our school district. So, I mean, that's why people want to move here. That's why property values are higher here. Yeah. So, you know, we're doing some things right, but everything's changing so fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what parents can't always wrap their heads around is like, these things are changing. It's, you know, Perrysburg schools are doing their due diligence, and we're not just changing things to change things. Like we're trying to be more, we're changing things for the positive, but sometimes change is seen as like everything is willy-nilly, especially if it happens fast, and parents get nervous and scared. Like, well, you're teaching my kids
and
this
it's different
that,
from they're used to. You know,
yes,
like, we didn't do that when I was in school, and it was like, well, yeah, but when you were in school, it was a totally different world. I mean, the world is changing so fast; everything's accelerated, and you know, we have to figure out a better way to address the educational system as a whole. But you know, there's a lot of people working on that. So.
Sure. I did get you off track a little bit. We were talking. I wanted to go back to you picking, or you know, you said you were going to be a science teacher. So what changed there?
Well, I took an anatomy class, and in anatomy in high school, I got an A. But you know, like if there was a bone there, you had to identify like 8 or 10 things on it. You know. Well, when you got to college, it was like there was like 120 things to memorize. So I think I got like a C+ in anatomy, and I was like, oh, well. And at the same time, I had an English professor who really liked my writing, and she was really encouraging me to write. So it was an easy move to say, all right, I'm going to be an English teacher. Then about maybe the next couple semesters, then I had a professor who didn't appreciate my writing style so much. And I knew I was going to have him for probably 5 more classes throughout my career. And I was like, well, then I started thinking elementary education. That's where it's at, because I'm a guy and they need guys in elementary. So, and that's kind of what stuck. Yeah. I mean, it helped that, you know, once I switched to elementary, it was me and 29 girls. My wife called it my harem.
I was just going to say, where does your, was this before or after you met her?
This was after.
Okay.
After, yeah. She was a senior when I was a freshman. Oh, okay. And I saw her, we would eat at this place called Marbeck Center, and there was a cereal bar, and she was up getting cereal at the cereal bar, and I'm having lunch with my friend Toad, and I was like,
that's
Toad.
Such a college name.
Yeah, isn't it? I'm like, Toad, that girl owns my heart. And he looks over and he says, I know her. And then we got to talking, and well, she was a senior and I was a freshman. I was like, it's April. We got a month of school left. This is never going to work out. So I was kind of like, I backed off. I was like, I'm not going to pursue this. Yeah. And then one night, a week or two later, Toad says, hey, we're going up the road to this other place, and you know, Terry's coming with us. And I was like, well, all right. And then, you know, that magical night she kissed me. She remembers it slightly different, and she says I kissed her.
Yeah.
Either way, I mean, it was after that. It was a whirlwind relationship, and we stayed together, and then we got married just a little bit after I graduated.
So because she was graduating, like what, and you thought like, well, there's only a month here. What's going to happen? Like, did she stay around there then? Because you still had, you know, all 3 more years of school.
Well, that summer she went off and she worked at a camp. And then the next year she was a social work major, and she was trying to get a job in social work. But, you know, she faced the same dilemma that a lot of young graduates face. Everybody wants you to have some experience. Nobody really wants to give you the experience.
That's amazing, because that's still 100% a thing right now.
Still a thing, absolutely. Although now I feel like they're getting a little more desperate. But
I know that there's a lot of the jobs with the Metro Parks. It's this level of schooling, but a lot of people put in or, right? You said or X amount of experience. That X amount of experience, I find different jobs when I'm just looking at jobs, it's getting less and less. Like you said, yeah.
So she worked at McDonald's for a while. She had worked at McDonald's when she was in like high school and college, and so she was a worker, and then finally she got her break, and she got hired by Marion County Children's Services, and I think she was making like $15,000 a year, with a college degree, but she lived in Upper Sandusky with some friends that she had graduated with, and so it was close enough that a couple of times a week I could drive over and see her, and so it was it was great. She I can't imagine what would have happened in my life had I not ended up with her.
I always think about that too, because I went to BG right after high school, as most Perrysburg kids do, and I lasted a semester. I didn't go to class, and they said don't come back. And but I had friends. I had a friend who I went to elementary school with who was on the football team at BGSU, and he was like, "You should try to be a walk on, this and that." I had a couple other people asking me to do it, and I was like, "No, I don't want to. I like football. I don't love it, And someone asked, like, "Do you regret not playing football?" I said, first of all, I don't regret a lot of stuff because things happen for a reason, but especially that, because there's no way I would have met my wife. I have 2 kids now. There's no way I'd be where I'm at if it wasn't for that. So I was like, no, there's no way I'd regret that. So that's
some of those things. I mean, it made a huge difference because I'm a complex individual, and she's very much, we're very opposite, and we knew that from the start.
Yeah.
But we had the same core values, and so our personalities have always kind of complemented each other. And I mean, like any relationship, we have our moments, but we've always managed. I've only recently really come to understand how much she saved my life. I mean, it's not easy to be married to me. And, she never really tries to tell me what to do. And if she does, I take heed of that because I know it's like, she never asked for anything. She's asking for this. And
so when you say like saved your life, is there something that, I feel like there's something that could like stand out where you can pinpoint like this?
Well, recently, back in September, I was diagnosed as bipolar 2.
Okay.
And so I've always struggled with mental health, and for a long time I didn't know it. It was just, in my generation, I mean, even now it's still kind of like this, but in my generation, nobody ever really talked about it. You didn't go to counseling or anything like that.
Especially being a guy.
Right, right. But back when I was saying like I was making wine, I stopped making wine because I had that panic attack. And then, so that was a clear indicator that I had some baggage. And then in 2014 through 2016, I went through a period of depression that, I mean, should have, could have killed me. I mean, I was severely depressed. I wasn't able to get out of it. I had started on like antidepressant medicines even before that, but it didn't work that well. And when this started, it was deep and it was bad. And fortunately, I was willing to, I went to the psychiatrist. I took the medicine. I did everything they said to do, but nothing seemed to work. And then I eventually pulled out of it. I always say it's because my friend Hilt, who is this Hungarian guy, he called me one time in August, and we had put in for this grant, and essentially we had gotten this grant through the European Union. And there were groups from 6 other countries waiting for me to finish my paperwork. And he was like, and I was at that, I mean, like, we've probably all heard of that time where you just hardly can get out of bed. I mean, it's dark. And he was like, Bill, we're going to walk you through this paperwork. And he did for about an hour and a half. He just walked me through everything I needed to type in. We did it. And then like a week later, he's like, okay, we got it. We're going to go to Latvia for our initial meeting in end of October. And that, just having that to look forward to, because I hadn't done any international travel for a year and a half or 2 years because I was barely getting out of bed.
Yeah.
But having that to look forward to, and I think just time was part of it, and I'm sure the medications were starting to kick in. But anyway, after school started that year, it's always tough at the beginning of the school year because there's just a lot of uncertainty and stress. But I made it through the first couple of weeks, and I kind of like stopped and thought one time. I was like, dang, the light's on, it felt brighter. I had something to look forward to. And so that was the beginning of a very bright period. Well, I had continued to be under the care of a psychiatrist, but a couple times, like they'd push me off to like a PA, and then I had another PA. And back in March of this year, I took a trip to Poland. I have a lot of friends in Ukraine, and when the war broke out in Ukraine, it was the same time my daughter got married, and the war broke out like 2 days before she got married. And it was just a really emotional thing. And so I did some things to raise some funds and do some things to help. And I ended up going to Poland for, I went to Poland and Prague and Czech Republic for a week. I split it. And when I was in Poland, I was basically by myself. I was working with a partner who helped me, make the arrangements that I needed to make there. But it was hard. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was having panic attacks. And I didn't have any medication with me or anything. On the train to Prague, it occurred to me. It was just like I was going to see my buddy Hilt. He was coming from Hungary. We were meeting there and we were going to hang out. So I was feeling pretty good, had something to look forward to. And it occurred to me, oh man, you had these panic attacks. That was panic attacks. And then so I got back home, and when I went to see my psychiatrist next, he was like, and I'm moving out of state, so you're going to get a new one. And I had only seen this guy a couple of times, so he hadn't figured out all the complexities of Bill Hilt, So I get this new psychiatrist, and after the first meeting, he changed my medication. And, he was kind of talking to me. I don't know, maybe I wasn't hearing it or whatever. But a few days after I was looking at the medication, I looked at the notes, and he said it had a new diagnosis of this bipolar 2. And bipolar 2 is marked by not as manic. Like when you have bipolar, your manic episodes a lot of times will end you in the hospital, in jail, dead broke, gambled away all your money. I mean, it's like those legendary people that just, go really off the rails. With bipolar 2, you don't have that. But what you have is typically longer and deeper depressions. So that kind of matched the experience that I had of, 2 years of darkness.
Yeah.
And then I read the description on WebMD of what bipolar 2 is. And I was kind of like, how did everybody miss this my whole life?
Yeah.
Because it was like,
Seems
this
really
was
obvious.
describing me. Yeah. And, we have a tendency as humans when somebody puts a label like that, then you start seeing everything. But I mean, like, honestly, this was like, it was the thing.
Well, for that new psychiatrist to see you, that was the only one time he saw you, and then
that was the one time he saw me.
Yeah.
And he had put it together. And my wife she's a licensed family and marriage counselor, and she, I guess she didn't really see it either. No, but everybody had kind of missed it. But then once he saw that, but then that really that throws me for a loop, because I was kind of a proud advocate for anxiety and depression. I would talk about it to people all the time, like, trying to get people to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like make it's prevalent in society. We have to talk about this. But then when I was bipolar 2, I was like, oh, that's more serious. That's a bad one. It's not a country club. Like 25% of us are on antidepressants. This is different.
Did you feel like, I can't talk about this?
I felt like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it might have taken me 6 weeks before I told my parents.
Wow.
Just because I was struggling with it. And I was struggling with this idea that, am I going to be able to be an advocate? But over now the last few months, I've gotten much more comfortable with it. I'm happy to talk about it with anybody. I've pretty much told most of my close friends, and I feel like I can continue to be a good advocate, and maybe this would even possibly make me an even better advocate. And I've had a lot of support. I told both boards, the boards that I'm on, I kind of let them know this was the thing. So, and I think mostly I want people to be aware so they can kind of watch out for me. Cause like, if you see me starting to slip and slide a little bit, you can let me know.
Yeah.
But it's still a relatively new thing. But
Do you find by sharing that people have, because you've been an advocate, do you find by sharing any of that stuff that people have come out like, oh yeah, I know someone, oh yeah, I'm not necessarily bipolar too, but have something that they can try to relate to?
You nailed it. I mean, I get like every time that I bring up mental health issues with anybody now, that people want to talk about it. It's all of a sudden you've created like this safe area where people can talk about it. And almost every time when I'm leaving, they're like, thank you for talking about this and sharing that, because it enabled us to do that. So now I'm kind of leaning into it, but you don't want to be the guy that shares a little too much information a little too quick. I didn't know if I was going to even mention it on this podcast, but as we're talking, you're making me feel very comfortable. And at the end of the day, I think it's something that people need to start talking about. So if one person hears this and reaches out, that makes the difference. Being an advocate for something like that, my concern is that people will perceive it as like I'm trying to use my disorder to get attention. It's all about me. So I'm still thinking a lot about how can I be an advocate without appearing that this is all about me and I want you to listen to my story. And it's really not. It's really, I want to give you a door to knock on and to come through if you've needed that for a while. So, and the only way you can do that is by talking about it.
Well, that's how I feel too. But I feel the same way. So as soon as you start talking about that, it just like you said, people start opening up to you. So I've said it before here. My mom was an alcoholic. She's been sober for a long time now. And my brother passed away from a drug overdose. But it's the same way. Like, I want to tell people because I want them to feel comfortable. Because dealing with drugs and alcohol in my family my entire life, like, I realize that it's everywhere. Like, people know, right? If it's not in your family, it's some friends. It's somebody that's dealing with it. So I like to let people know about this stuff. But I don't want them to know so they feel sorry for me. I just want them to know, like, hey, I can help you with things, or if you need someone to talk to about it, that's why I'm telling you. Like, you don't have to feel. I'm already sad about it. Like, I grieved. Maybe sometimes I get mad at myself for not grieving enough. I told my wife, I think I cried more over my dog when we had to put our dog down than my brother, just because we didn't have a good relationship. But I would just want people to know that, because like everyone has something, so we can talk about it and make it, try to help people. Yeah.
Yep, I think that's you got it. You nailed it.
Yeah. So, I told you an hour. We're there right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it goes fast. I appreciate you coming out here. I would love to have you come back on, because we didn't even talk about you becoming a teacher, working at Perrysburg, helping these kids, coaching football, like, even your international trips.
I got some good football stories. Yeah. I got some great international stories.
Yeah, so if you want to, I would love to have you come back on sometime.
Absolutely.
We can arrange that. So thank you. Before we go, I do want to say thanks again to Fort Meigs CrossFit for helping me come or allowing me to come to their business. Again, if you want anything, workout stuff that they got is all at their website, fortmeigscrossfit.com.
I might have to check it out, because I'm getting tired of walking up and down stairs all the time. Maybe I need to put a little something else in my repertoire of exercise.
Yeah, it's always good to change it up, right?
Yeah.
So that'd be great. Yeah. So thanks again, Bill, for coming on the podcast.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for checking out this episode of the Nerd Ball Podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're hearing this, on any of the podcatchers. On YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We're coming at you 2 times a week now, audio and video. Check us out on all the social medias. Just search the Nerd Ball Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're out there. Gmail is the nerdballpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to shoot us an email, we'll be happy to get back to you. Thanks to Real JP Multimedia, Cuttlefish Graphics, Perrysburg Junior High STEM Lab, and Big Daddy Graphics for helping out the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.